Before I share my story, let me ask you, what would you do if the child you trusted most asked for help, then left you with nothing but secrets? I thought I was just helping my daughter through a rough patch, letting her borrow my pension just for 1 month. But the day I opened her closet and saw what she'd been hiding, I realized I'd spent years believing love was enough to keep us close. This isn't just a story about money or trust. It's about the moment you decide to stop making excuses for someone else's choices and the courage it takes to face the truth, even when it breaks your heart. So settle in, and if you've ever wondered what you'd do in my shoes, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next changed not just my family, but the way I see myself forever. The day I opened my daughter's closet and saw what she'd been hiding, I realized I'd spent my whole life believing love could fix anything. It started with a phone call, not the kind that comes in the middle of the night, but the kind that makes your heart skip a beat before you even answer. My daughter, Emily, was on the other end, her voice bright, a little too cheerful. "Mom, I need a favor, just for 1 month. I'm behind on rent and work's been slow. Could I borrow your pension check? I'll pay you back as soon as I can." I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. My pension wasn't much, but it was all I had. Still, Emily was my only child, my pride and joy, the reason I got out of bed in the morning. I'd raised her on my own after her father died, working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, making sure she had every opportunity I never did. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady. "Just for 1 month." She thanked me, her relief palpable. "You're the best, Mom. I promise I'll pay you back." The first month passed, then another. Emily always had a reason. Her hours were cut, her car broke down, she was waiting on a check from a client. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that things would get better, that she'd make it right. I cut back on groceries, skipped my medication, put off paying the electric bill. I told myself it was temporary, that Emily needed me, that I was doing the right thing. But as the months dragged on, the worry grew heavier. I started to notice little things. Emily's phone calls grew less frequent, her visits shorter, her laughter more forced. She always seemed tired, distracted, her eyes darting away when I asked about work, about money, about her plans. One afternoon, I stopped by her apartment to drop off a casserole. The building was old, the paint peeling, the stairs creaking under my feet. Emily answered the door, her hair pulled back, her smile tight. "Hi, Mom. You didn't have to do this." I smiled, handing her the dish. "I wanted to. You sounded tired on the phone." She shrugged, stepping aside to let me in. The apartment was cluttered, the air thick with the scent of incense and something else I couldn't place. I glanced around, noticing the stack of unopened mail on the table, the empty bottles in the sink, the pile of laundry in the corner. "Everything okay, Emily?" I asked, my voice gentle. She nodded, her eyes darting away. "Just busy, work, been crazy." I sat on the couch, watching as she moved around the kitchen, her hands shaking as she poured us each a cup of tea. We talked about nothing and everything, her job, her friends, the weather. She asked about Ruth, about the garden, about the neighbors. But every time I tried to bring up the money, she changed the subject, her smile growing tighter, her voice more brittle. After an hour, I stood to leave, my heart heavy. "Let me know if you need anything, Emily. I'm always here." She hugged me, her arms tight around my shoulders. "I know, Mom, thank you." That night, I lay awake, listening to the wind in the trees, the creak of the old house, the distant sound of a train on the tracks. I thought about Emily, about the little girl who used to run to me with scraped knees and wild stories, about the woman she'd become, about the secrets she was keeping. I realized then that sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is admit that love isn't always enough. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is refusing to let yourself be erased. If you've ever felt taken for granted by someone you love, or if you want to see what happens when a mother finally faces the truth, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever loaned money to family and regretted it? I read every story, and you never know who you might help by sharing. The weeks slipped by, each one a little heavier than the last. I tried to keep my spirits up, telling myself that Emily would come through, that she just needed time. I cut corners where I could, buying day-old bread, skipping the bus and walking to the market, turning down the heat and wearing an extra sweater. I told myself it was just for a little while, that things would get better, that Emily would pay me back. But the bills piled up. The phone calls from the utility company grew more urgent. I started skipping my medication, rationing my groceries, making do with less and less. I told no one, not even Ruth, not even Grace, my neighbor who always offered to help. I didn't want anyone to know how bad things had gotten, how much I was struggling, how much I'd given up for my daughter. Emily's calls became less frequent. When she did call, she was always in a hurry, always distracted, always promising to visit next week. I missed her laughter, her stories, the way she used to curl up on the couch with me and talk about her dreams. I wondered where that girl had gone, what had happened to the bond we once shared. One afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Novick at the market. She looked me up and down, her eyes full of concern. "Anna, you look tired. Are you all right?" I forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Just a little run down. Emily's been having a hard time. I'm helping her out." Mrs. Novick nodded, her voice gentle. "You're a good mother, but don't forget to take care of yourself, too." I thanked her, her words lingering in my mind long after I left the store. That evening, Ruth called, her voice full of worry. "Anna, you sound exhausted. Are you eating enough? Are you taking your medicine?" I hesitated, not wanting to worry her. "I'm fine, Ruth, just tired." She was silent for a moment, then said, "You know you can tell me anything, right? You don't have to do this alone." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "I know, thank you." But I did feel alone. I felt invisible, like a ghost in my own life. I missed the days when Emily needed me, when she called just to say hello, when she asked for advice or shared her worries. Now it seemed like all she wanted was my money, my help, my silence. I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake, if I'd enabled her, if I'd let my love blind me to the truth. One night, I lay awake, listening to the wind rattling the windows, the old house creaking around me. I thought about Tom, about the life we'd built, about the sacrifices we'd made for Emily. I wondered what he would say if he could see us now, his wife struggling to make ends meet, his daughter growing more distant by the day. I realized then that sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is admit that love isn't always enough. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is learning to let go. The next month, I found myself watching Emily more closely. I noticed the way she avoided my eyes when I asked about work, the way she changed the subject when I mentioned the money, the way she always seemed to be in a hurry, always on her way somewhere else. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, that she was doing her best, that she'd pay me back as soon as she could. But the doubt lingered, growing heavier with every passing day. One Saturday, I decided to surprise Emily with a visit. I baked her favorite banana bread, wrapped it in a clean towel, and took the bus across town to her apartment. The building was older than I remembered, the paint peeling, the steps creaking under my feet. I knocked on her door, my heart pounding. She answered, her hair pulled back, her eyes tired. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I smiled, holding out the bread. "I thought you could use a treat. I haven't seen you in weeks." She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was cluttered, the air thick with the scent of incense and something else I couldn't place. I glanced around, noticing the stack of unopened mail on the table, the empty bottles in the sink, the pile of laundry in the corner. "Everything okay, Emily?" I asked, my voice gentle. She nodded, her smile forced. "Just busy, work, been crazy." I sat on the couch, watching as she moved around the kitchen, her hands shaking as she poured us each a cup of tea. We talked about nothing and everything, her job, her friends, the weather. She asked about Ruth, about the garden, about the neighbors. But every time I tried to bring up the money, she changed the subject, her smile growing tighter, her voice more brittle. After an hour, I stood to leave, my heart heavy. "Let me know if you need anything, Emily. I'm always here." She hugged me, her arms tight around my shoulders. "I know, Mom, thank you." On the way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I thought about the unopened mail, the empty bottles, the way Emily's hands shook as she poured the tea. I wondered if she was in trouble, if she was hiding something, if she was afraid to tell me the truth. That night, I called Ruth, my voice trembling. "Ruth, I'm worried about Emily. She's not herself. She's distant, distracted, always tired. I think something's wrong." Ruth was silent for a moment, then said, "Anna, you need to trust your instincts. If you think something's wrong, it probably is." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "I just don't know what to do." She sighed, her voice gentle. "Maybe it's time to stop waiting for Emily to come to you. Maybe it's time to find out what's really going on." The next day, I decided to clean Emily's apartment while she was at work. I called her, offering to help with the laundry, the dishes, the clutter. She hesitated, then agreed, her voice tight. "Just don't go through my things, Mom. I'll take care of it when I get home." I promised, but as I cleaned, I couldn't help but notice the little things, the unopened bills, the empty bottles, the receipts for things I didn't recognize. I found a stack of credit card statements, each one with a higher balance than the last. I found letters from collection agencies, warnings about overdue payments, threats of legal action. My heart pounded as I realized the truth. Emily was drowning in debt, and she'd been using my pension to stay afloat. I sat on the couch, the bills spread out in front of me, my hands shaking. I thought about the years I'd spent working 2 jobs to provide for Emily, about the sacrifices I'd made, about the love I'd given. I wondered when she'd started hiding things from me, when she'd stopped trusting me, when she'd started seeing me as a safety net instead of a mother. When Emily came home, she found me sitting in the living room, the bills in my lap. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp. I looked up, my eyes full of tears. "Emily, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask for help?" She stared at me, her face pale, her hands trembling. "I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just had a little more time." I hugged her, holding her close as she cried. I realized then that sometimes the hardest thing you can do is ask for help. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone you love drown alone. After that day, things changed between Emily and me. She was quieter, more withdrawn, her eyes shadowed with worry. I tried to be gentle, to offer support without judgment, but the tension between us grew with every passing day. I could feel her pulling away, building walls I didn't know how to climb. I started to notice more signs of trouble. Emily stopped answering my calls, stopped coming by for dinner, stopped asking for help. I worried about her constantly, lying awake at night, listening to the wind rattle the windows, wondering if she was safe, if she was eating, if she was sleeping. Ruth tried to reassure me. "She's an adult, Anna. She has to find her own way. You can't save her from everything." I nodded, but the ache in my chest wouldn't go away. One afternoon, I decided to visit Emily's apartment. I brought a basket of groceries, hopping to fill her fridge to remind her that she wasn't alone. When I arrived, the building was quiet, the hallway dim and musty. I knocked, but there was no answer. I tried the door, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. I stepped inside, calling her name. The apartment was a mess, dishes piled in the sink, clothes scattered on the floor, the air heavy with the scent of stale coffee and something sour. I set the groceries on the counter, my heart pounding. I moved through the rooms, picking up clothes, straightening pillows, opening windows to let in fresh air. I found a stack of unopened mail on the table, more bills, more warnings, more threats. I felt a wave of fear, wondering how deep the hole had gotten, how much Emily was hiding. As I tidied the bedroom, I noticed the closet door was ajar. Something about it made me pause. I hesitated, then opened it wider, my breath catching in my throat. Inside, the closet was packed with shopping bags, designer labels, expensive shoes, dresses with tags still attached. There were boxes of jewelry, bottles of perfume, stacks of makeup. I stared in disbelief, my mind racing. How could Emily afford all this? Where had the money come from? My pension, my savings, the bills I'd put off. The meals I'd skipped. Also, she could fill her closet with things she didn't need, things she'd never even worn. I felt a wave of anger, sharper than anything I'd ever known. I thought about the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, the trust I'd placed in her. I thought about the nights I'd gone to bed hungry, the days I'd walked to work in the rain, the hours I'd spent worrying about her. And I realized then that sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is see the truth. When Emily came home, she found me sitting on the bed, the closet door open, the shopping bags spread out around me. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp. I looked up, my eyes full of tears. "Emily, why? Why did you do this?" She stared at me, her face pale, her hands trembling. "I don't know. I wanted to feel better. I thought if I had nice things, if I looked the part, maybe everything else would fall into place." I shook my head, my voice breaking. "You took everything I had, Emily. You promised it was just for 1 month. You promised you'd pay me back." She sank to the floor, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." I hugged her, holding her close as she cried. I realized then that sometimes, the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone you love destroy themselves. And sometimes, the only way to save them is to let them face the consequences of their choices. The days after I found Emily's closet full of secrets were some of the hardest of my life. I tried to keep my anger in check, to remember that she was still my daughter, still the little girl I'd rocked to sleep, still the woman I'd hoped would find her way. But every time I thought about the bills I'd skipped, the meals I'd missed, the medicine I'd gone without, my heart ached with a new kind of pain. Emily avoided me for days. She stopped answering my calls, stopped replying to my messages, stopped coming by the house. I worried about her constantly, wondering if she was safe, if she was eating, if she was sleeping. I wanted to reach out to fix things, to make it all better. But I knew I couldn't. I knew she had to face the consequences of her choices. Ruth was my anchor. She came by every evening, bringing dinner, laughter, and the kind of comfort only a sister can give. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. "Anna, you did the right thing," she said, her voice gentle. "You can't save her from herself. She has to want to change." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "I just wish I knew how to help her." Ruth squeezed my hand. "Sometimes, the best thing you can do is let go. Sometimes, love means letting someone fall so they can learn to stand on their own." One afternoon, Emily showed up at my door, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, inviting her in, my heart pounding. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us heavy. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I messed up. I spent all your money, I lied to you, I hurt you. I don't know how to fix it." I reached for her hand, my own voice shaking. "You can start by telling the truth, Emily. You can start by taking responsibility. You can start by asking for help." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I want to change, Mom. I want to be better. I want to make you proud." I hugged her, holding her close as she cried. I realized then that sometimes, the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone you love destroy themselves. And sometimes, the only way to save them is to let them face the consequences of their choices. That night I sat on the porch, the stars bright above me, the air cool and sweet. I thought about Emily, about the life we'd shared, about the future we could still build together. I realized then that sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is let go. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is trusting that the people you love will find their way back to you. The days after Emily's confession were a slow, painful unraveling. She moved back in with me for a while, her spirit bruised, her confidence shaken. She spent long hours in her room, sorting through the clothes and shoes she'd bought, making piles to donate, to sell, to return if she could. I watched her from the doorway, my heart aching for the little girl I'd raised, the woman she was trying so hard to become. We talked late into the night, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in tears. She told me about the pressure she felt to keep up, to look the part, to prove to the world, and to herself, that she was successful. She told me about the shame of falling behind on bills, the fear of asking for help, the loneliness that grew with every secret she kept. I listened, holding her hand, reminding her that she was loved, that she was enough, that she didn't have to carry her burdens alone. Ruth was a constant presence, her laughter and wisdom filling the house with warmth. She helped Emily make a budget, taught her how to cook simple meals, took her for long walks in the park. She reminded us both that healing takes time, that forgiveness is a process, that love is sometimes the only thing that can hold a family together when everything else falls apart. Grace, my granddaughter, visited often, her laughter echoing through the house, her stories brightening even the darkest days. She brought friends from school, young women and men full of dreams and worries, and we'd sit around the kitchen table, sharing meals and memories. I realized that my home was full again, not with the family I'd lost, but with the family I'd found. Emily started seeing a counselor, working through the pain, the guilt, the fear. She joined a support group for people struggling with debt, found solace in the stories of others who had lost their way and found it again. Slowly, she began to heal. She started talking about the future again, about going back to school, about finding a new job, about building a life based on truth, not lies. I watched her grow stronger, more confident, more willing to ask for help. I saw the light return to her eyes, the hope return to her voice, the love return to her heart. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it." I hugged her, my heart full. "That's what mothers do, Emily. We love even when it hurts." She smiled, her arms tight around me. "I want to make it up to you, Mom. I want to pay you back, to help you, to be the daughter you deserve." I shook my head, tears slipping down my cheeks. "You already are, Emily. You always have been." As the months passed, Emily found a new job, one that paid less but brought her more joy. She started volunteering at the community center, helping others who were struggling, sharing her story. Offering hope. She paid off her debts, little by little, learning to live with less, learning to find happiness in the simple things. We created new routines, movie nights with popcorn, Saturday morning pancakes, long walks in the park with Daisy. I watched Emily grow braver, kinder, more resilient, and I knew I was doing something right. The holidays came, and with them, a new sense of peace. Emily and I decorated the house together, stringing lights and baking cookies, filling the rooms with warmth and laughter. We invited Ruth and Grace, neighbors and friends, anyone who needed a place to belong. The house was full of music, the scent of cinnamon and pine, the sound of children's laughter. On Christmas morning, Emily handed me a small box, her hands trembling. "Open it, Mom," she whispered, her eyes shining. Inside was a note, written in her careful, looping script. "Thank you for loving me when I couldn't love myself. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I promise to spend the rest of my life making you proud." I hugged her, my tears falling freely. "You already do, Emily. You already do." As the new year began, I looked around at the life we'd rebuilt. The house filled with light, the laughter of friends and family, the quiet joy of ordinary days, and felt a deep, abiding sense of hope. I wasn't the same woman I'd been before Emily took my pension. I was stronger, wiser, more compassionate with myself and with the people I loved. I knew that life would never be perfect, that there would always be pain and loss and disappointment. But I also knew that I could survive, that I could rebuild, that I could find joy in the small, everyday moments. I was still here, I was still standing, and I was ready for whatever came next. Spring brought a new lightness to our lives. Emily and I found a rhythm, one built on honesty, small joys, and the kind of trust that can only grow after everything else has been stripped away. She started paying a little rent, not because I asked, but because she wanted to contribute. She brought home flowers from the market, filled the house with color, and left notes on the fridge. "Love you, Mom. Thank you for today." We spent weekends in the garden, planting tomatoes and herbs, laughing as Daisy chased butterflies through the grass. Emily learned to cook, burning more than a few dinners, but always trying again. I taught her how to sew a button, how to balance a checkbook, how to find beauty in the ordinary. Ruth visited often, her arms full of fresh bread and stories from her corner of the world. She and Emily grew closer, sharing recipes and laughter, their old tensions fatting into something softer, something like friendship. One afternoon, Grace came by with a surprise, her acceptance letter to nursing school. We celebrated with cake and music, the house full of hope and pride. Emily hugged her cousin, her eyes shining. "I'm so proud of you, Grace. You're going to change the world." Grace smiled, her voice full of love. "I learned from the best. From you, from Grandma, from all the women in this family who never gave up." I realized then that the legacy I was leaving wasn't about money or possessions. It was about resilience, about forgiveness, about the quiet strength that comes from loving and being loved. Emily started volunteering at the community center, helping others who were struggling, sharing her story, offering hope. She paid off her debts, little by little, learning to live with less, learning to find happiness in the simple things. We created new routines, movie nights with popcorn, Saturday morning pancakes, long walks in the park with Daisy. I watched Emily grow braver, kinder, more resilient, and I knew I was doing something right. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it." I hugged her, my heart full. "That's what mothers do, Emily. We love even when it hurts." She smiled, her arms tight around me. "I want to make it up to you, Mom. I want to pay you back, to help you, to be the daughter you deserve." I shook my head, tears slipping down my cheeks. "You already are, Emily. You always have been." As the seasons changed, so did we. The house felt warmer, the laughter louder, the memories sweeter. I realized then that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing to move forward together. And I promised myself that, whatever happened next, I would never let myself be erased. Sometimes, the people we love most are the ones who test our strength the hardest. I never imagined my own daughter would take my pension and leave me with nothing but worry and questions, or that I'd find the truth hidden in her closet. But life has a way of showing us that our worth isn't measured by what we give up, but by the love and boundaries we hold on to, no matter how much it hurts. If you've ever been taken for granted by someone you love, or if you've ever had to choose between helping and enabling, I hope you know you're not alone. I know what it's like to sit in the quiet after everyone's gone, to wonder if you did enough, if you loved enough, if you mattered enough. I know what it's like to feel the ache of old wounds and the hope of new beginnings, to want to hold on and let go at the same time. But I also know that healing is possible. That courage is a choice you make every day, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in ways that change everything. I know that you can be betrayed and still forgive, that you can be emptied out and still find a way to fill your life with hope again. Would you have confronted your child, or kept pretending for the sake of peace? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story, because sometimes sharing our pain is the first step toward healing. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who might need a little hope tonight. Your support means more than you know. Thank you for listening and for being part of this family. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, even after the deepest heartbreak, you can still choose to begin again. And if you want to see what happens when a woman finally chooses herself, or if you believe in the power of second chances, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the next story might just be the one you need.